We should, of course, start with what we already have, and some people like Larry have had success with the fuel saver at Pantone, and I had to throw in Ty Robinson's Intergalactic Tri-Fuel Space Cruiser just because I like the title of it. And of course, we're not going to talk this hour about energy efficiency, but it's in the back of our minds that's something that we're certainly not going to ignore. But there's such a huge amount of energy to be saved in building. Why aren't more people doing earth-sheltered buildings? I just don't get it, or passive solar of some sort. There's so much that can be done. And this is what you guys are all about here at the Alternative Energy Partnership Conference. I'm just learning right and left. In fact, there were so many fascinating conversations here that I didn't really have a chance to get my thoughts together and be coherent about what I was going to say with you, because this is a field that I haven't really explored as much, and I'm going to. We do have a chapter in our book that I co-authored with Joel Garvin about water as fuel, but there's so much to learn here. I did meet Stan Meyer years ago, and I really do think that the technology was there for sure. People that he had around him, but of course it was very complicated by human factors, and I just hope that somebody is going to be able to bring that out to the public. I threw in a picture down there from James Roby's Water Fuel Museum of Stan. So I won't just read off this list, but the point is I'm sure we have more than, well, maybe a couple of dozen of varieties that we cover in the Breakthrough Power book. Again, the wonderful variety, the choice that we have. And no, they're not on the market. We don't have that choice, but we do have a choice of looking into these, and those of you who have the gift of building prototypes and understanding the technical details may find one of these other areas that you're going to experiment in. It was really gratifying for me in one of the conferences in Germany when a couple of students from the University of Berlin came up to me and said, well, we wouldn't have been here if we hadn't read The Coming Energy Revolution. That was my book that came out in 1996. And so that made me feel, like I saw them at another conference and just felt all motherly because I'm glad that I turned them on to it, because they turned out they worked with a scientist over there who's considered the Tesla of the Black Forest, and I think they'll really make a lot of progress. How many of you have heard about the Blacklight Power, Randall Mills Blacklight Power? Just a few? Yeah. Well, this is getting power from water in an entirely different way. It's not fusion, it's not combustion, it's not fission. It's his background is in chemistry, and his theory is that what's going on is, and when I tell you this, you're going to say, oh, this is impossible, but maybe his theory is wrong, but his experiments are right. He's actually got all sorts of results. His theory is that the hydrogen atom, he calls it the hydrino, that the orbit of the electron can get smaller, and then power is released at that point. Whether or not his book here, his theory does turn out to be correct, he certainly has something there that is maybe closer to commercialization than most things. He's got a lot of big names like Shelby Brewer, who was the Assistant Secretary of Energy in the Reagan administration, is on his board, and had scientists in Europe and all sorts of places that have replicated experiments, but he's run into the old the variations of barriers getting in the way. In his case, it was he nearly had a patent and you know, need the patent to get the funding, if you're going after the meaningful big amounts of funding to really go into manufacturing. And they even had a number for the patent that was ready to be published in the Gazette or whatever it's called.
2 weeks away.
Yeah, and then they got a phone call. And what had happened is that somebody had phoned the patent office and complained. So one of the physicists who's in with the patent office complained that this was impossible science and therefore shouldn't get a patent. And so it was just unprecedented that they would withdraw a patent at that point, but they did. So the barriers are in the way of some of these technologies. It's not just vested interest buying up a patent and shelving it. Sometimes it's academics who don't want to look at something that might make their work obsolete. And in the case of something like Randall Mills, it's been the hot fusion scientists, or are also they've made sure that the cold fusion researchers didn't get very far, but they can't stop it anymore now. It's cat's out of the bag on that one now. I'm sure it's a combination of human factors, fear of not being at the top of the heap anymore, fear of loss of your funding, and they've all probably big mortgages, big homes and everything, and maybe a bit of arrogance too. I know I listened in on or lurked on some discussion group called Vortex back in the early days of the cold fusion discussions, and there were the critics who just wouldn't look at the successful experiments. They just wouldn't even go take a look. But they found all sorts of nitpicking. That's fine. That's what science is. That's what it's all about. You're supposed to criticize, and then you go back and see if that criticism was valid. But they wouldn't even look. So the claims for the blacklight power cell is the output of between 100 and 1,000 times more energy than if the fuel were burned. And of course, releases oxygen into the air. That's always great. Now, one of the byproducts of the blacklight process are new molecular combinations. And some of those new materials show promise for kind of a plastic-like material